What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from Wide from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh video, and this is going to be a very fun one because we're finally in Reaper format. I know a lot of people have been waiting for me to get to this format, and I've been waiting to get to this format as well, as this format holds a special place in my heart because it's when I started really getting involved in online retro formats. So I'm really excited to dive into this format held in March 2006 in the SJC Long Beach of that year and using the October 2005 ban list. It also uses cards going up to Shadow of Infinity and some promos. So it includes cards from Elemental Energy and Shadow of Infinity. If you didn't check out my video covering the new cards in this format, definitely check that out because a very exhaustive list of the new cards added. But I will say that most of the new cards added don't really matter too much. One of the cards that really does matter a lot is Treeborn Frog, though, because Treeborn Frog is a very powerful level 1 monster that says, not once per turn, that's a new errata to it, but basically, during your standby phase of this card is in your graveyard and you do not control a Treeborn Frog, you can special summon this card, but you must control no spell or trap cards to activate and resolve this effect. Generally, if you want to bring this back, you don't really need to worry about that too much, especially if you're playing traps like Raigeki Break, which can both pitch a Treeborn Frog to grave and just be used in your draw phase or your standby phase to open up your back row to let you bring out a Treeborn Frog. So that's very good. And you can pair this with some very powerful tribute monsters like Mobius Frost Monarch, like Thestalos, the Firestorm Monarch, and like Zaborg, the Thunder Monarch. There's also other monarchs like Grand Mark or other good tribute monsters like Dark Ruler Hades, Jinzo, or Spell Canceller. But most of the time when you see a Monarch deck, it's playing things like Mobius, Thestalos, and Zaborg. Now, I chose to start with this deck, not because it's the best deck in the format by a mile. I do think it is a very good deck, probably tier 1. Although, realistically, how good this deck is in this format depends on who you ask. I want to start with this deck because I do think it is one of the most defining decks of the format. Because this is not just any Monarch deck, this is Stein Monarch. So this is using Cyber Stein to bring out big fusion monsters like Cyber End Dragon or Cyber Twin Dragon and closing out the game with that. You can also pair it with Last Will, which does have an updated effect. So that way it's back to its original wording, basically. You're able to use this before or after a monster is sent for field to grave. So that means that it gives you a bit of flexibility in what plays you want to do with this deck. And that can be very, very powerful because if you tribute off a Monarch here and, you activate Last Will to bring out Cyberstein, bring out Cyber Twin Dragon, that is 2,800 attacks each times 2 for the Cyber Twin Dragon, plus 2,400 attack from the Monarch. And that is actually lethal damage, exactly. I mean, there's also 700 from the Stein, but you could even leave the Stein in defense to potentially play a bit defensively in case your opponent has a way to stop this. So very, very powerful deck if it's able to pull off that play. And even if you aren't able to pull that off that play, this deck can outgrind your opponent in many, many ways. So very, very powerful deck, very scary deck, and it's definitely a deck that a lot of people sort of think of when they think of this format because, you can only get Stein comboed, so many times before it starts to leave scars. And I think a lot of people played this format, they got hit with the Stein OTK a little bit too much, and then they're like, I don't want to play this format anymore. I don't necessarily think that's a good way to view it. I mean, I'm not going to begrudge these people for not playing the format, but I do think that if you go into it with an open mind and you acknowledge that a deck like this does exist in the format, I think it'll become a lot better for you. So this deck does exist. It is something that a lot of decks are playing around. A lot of decks are siding around as well. But I don't think it's necessarily the undisputed best deck in the format. There are other decks that can counter it and also just be very good on their own. So I do think that, it's a shame that a lot of people got turned away from the format by this deck, but I wanted to show off this deck at the start just because I wanted to get it out of the way. Before diving into the new jank, I wanted to sort of cover the deck that is sort of loomed large over the format, and maybe we'll see how good it is. Maybe it's not as good as people expect. Maybe it's better than people expect. But before we do that, let's dive into the deck breakdown here. So, of course, we got all the Monarchs here. We've got the Treeborn Frogs. Mobius can pop back row. Thestalos can pitch a card from hand and also deal some burn damage occasionally, and Zaborg can pop monsters. We've also got some other cards like Cyber Dragon, which can pair with Treeborn Frog, but oftentimes you're just special summoning this out when you don't have a Treeborn Frog in rotation, and it can give you a tribute fodder for like a Monarch here, or it can just allow you to get even more aggressive with 2,100 attack. We've got the Cyber Stein to fetch out off the Last Will. We've got a Break of the Magic Warrior to pop our opponent's back row. We got a DD Warrior Lady here to banish our opponent's stuff. We've got Triple Mystic Tomato. This can either go into Sangan or Stein, or also Spirit Reaper. Spirit Reaper is very good at stalling for a bit and also getting a tribute monster on field. So that's going to do it for the monster lineup. As I mentioned, the Treeborn Frog is at 3 here. Some decks do cut this down a bit, but I do like having 3 copies. So that way you access it as quickly as possible. And also you do have Raigeki Breaks here to pitch excess frogs if you really need them. For the spells, we got Triple Brain Control to pair with these Monarchs, as well as Double Soul Exchange. Each of these can sort of be used to tribute your opponent's monsters and bring out a powerful Monarch. So that's very, very good. Although, as an important note, if you do take control of your opponent's monster with like Brain Control or tribute off with Soul Exchange, that won't actually trigger Last Will because it has to go from your side of the field to your graveyard. So it's important to note that. We also got Confiscation and Dark Hole. For some reason, they decided to unban these, shifting from the GOAT format ban list to the October 2005 ban list. So these are legal and they are played. They're very, very powerful, but a lot of people don't like these cards. I think they're fine, honestly, but maybe that's just because I've played in too many DM formats with too many powerful Sakiwanas running around. Also got a Heavy Storm and an MST for more spell and trap removal. We got the double Last Will. Some decks shoots to play 3. I think 2 is fine. And, again, you don't necessarily need to go into Stein to win. It's just sort of a win button if you need it. We've got a Metamorphosis here as well. This can also trigger Last Will, and it can also pair with the Treeborn Frog. You can bring back a Treeborn Frog, meta it away into a Thousand Eyes Restrict here, and then suck up your opponent's monster, then tribute that for a Monarch, and that can be a really, really powerful play. So meta is a very good card here. We got a Mystical Space Typhoon as well, as I mentioned. We got a Snatch Shield. This can be used just like BrainCon or Soul Exchange, but it can also just be used to get aggressive in general. We've got triple Raigeki Break. This can be used to pitch a Treeborn Frog and also just pop our opponent's stuff. And we've got a Torrential Tribute. Very, very powerful blowout trap if our opponent plays into it. For the side deck, we got a variety of things. We got a Cyber Dragon. When you're going second, this can be good to bring in potentially. I like to side out one Spirit Reaper for a Cyber Dragon because I think that generally Cyber Dragon has more utility going second than Spirit Reaper does. And also Spirit Reaper is better going first because you want to set it so that way your opponent can't hit into it. So I like bringing in the third Cyber Dragon for one Spirit Reaper in game 2 if I'm going second. But I know that sort of varies from player to player, and I'm sure that Jazz, who originated this deck, because this version of the deck that I'm using was actually the winning deck in a format library tournament in Reaper format that had 66 people, so not a small sample size by any means, but this was a Jazz's deck list, and so I'm not sure how exactly they sided in this Cyber Dragon, but that's how I've been siding it. We've got double Hot S here if you're up against a Recruiter heavy deck, or potentially a deck playing Treeborn Frogs and you want to stop those from coming back, then Hot S can be pretty good here. It also beats over other Monarchs. We've got a Jinzo here to shut down trap focus strategies. We got triple Spell Counselor to shut down spell focus strategies. We got any other Soul Exchange to bring in. I guess if our opponent has a variety of sticky monsters, this can be good to bring in. We've got double Divine Wrath here. It's a counter trap that can negate monster effects, which is pretty good, and can come up in certain situations. We got double Sacred Armor against more aggressive decks, and we got triple Threatening Roar against OTK decks. For the Fusion deck, it's an unlimited Fusion deck, so you can proxy in whatever you want here. I did make some slight changes to the 15 cards that you see in front of you from the deck on Format Library, but again, it's unlimited, so those changes don't really matter that much. The only things I did was I put in a Dragoness, and I put in a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, replacing not Cyber Stein, but Cyber Blader. And Master of Oz here. Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon just has more attack than Master of Oz, so you don't really need Master of Oz. And I chose to put in the Dragoness because I feel like with Metamorphosis, going into the level 3 will come up more often than having a Cyber Blader will, because Cyber Blader is a very, very niche card. Most of the time, you don't really care to bring out Cyber Blader, and it's just outclassed by other cards. But, having it in the extra deck can be good, and just knowing about it can be good, but if you do need it, you can always proxy it in here, because again, we're playing with an unlimited extra deck, so, if you do need it, you can bring it in, but most of the time you won't, so I chose to put in the Dragoness because I felt like it would come up in more cases. But that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. If you want an in-depth breakdown of this sort of fusion deck, you can check out many of my other videos featuring Stein decks, because nothing really changed in terms of the fusion deck besides the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon here, and potentially a Cyber Blader. But, you're mainly going to End Dragon and Twin Dragon to do your OTK stuff, Baltron and Gate effects, Dark Blade Dragon Knight to banish cards from the graveyard. You don't really need Dark Flare Knight. You could probably cut this as well. Dark Fire Dragon for meta targets. Same with Dragon to the Wicked Knight. Fiend Skull Dragon for full effects or targeting traps. Gatling Dragon for popping your opponent's stuff, or occasionally your stuff as well. Dragoon for protection from targeting. You've got Reaper on the Nightmare to get in directly for an indirect attack, or to get around certain floodgates. Ryu Senshi shuts down traps. Lost Word from Another Planet shuts down summons, and Thousand Eyes Restrict can suck up your opponent's monster. But that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. Let's dive into some games and actually see how this deck performs. Okay, in our first game here, we got a game against Dumptruck. If you can get to the channel, always a pleasure to have them on. We will unfortunately lose the die roll, but we do have a pretty good hand starting out with the Comfy, Breaker, Tomato, TT, and Thestalos. So we got Tomato to get out of Thestalos potentially, because if they attack into it, we bring in another monster, then we tribute off for Thestalos. We got the Comfy to repart their hand, so I'm feeling pretty good about this. Until they fire a Comfy of their own. I mean, that's the thing about this format, If you draw Comfy, your opponent might draw Comfy as well. So they're going to rip the Comfy out of hand. We won't get a peek at their hand. And they're going to set one pass back to us. We draw a Metamorphosis, which is pretty good, but doesn't really help us here. We're just going to set the Tomato and set the TT pass back to our opponent. And I mean, this is kind of the best play we have. It's not really the best because they've got Zaborg. They summon on Zaborg, pop the tomato. They can get in for 24. We get TT for Zaborg, but I don't necessarily want to use it because I don't want them then to fire the last will, bring out Stein, and go for a big play. So they're just going to pass back to us, though, and I'm perfectly fine with that. We draw Soul Exchange, which is pretty good. And we're just going to go for the Soul Exchange, bring out the Thestalos. If they have Dark Hole, they've got Dark Hole. We've got TT then to, clear whatever they bring out afterwards. And we hit a Warrior Lady. I'm pretty happy about that. So they will be taking 400 damage there as well. We'll pass back to them. And it looks like they're just going to bring out Breaker, and that's fine by us. They go to pop our back row. We could have potentially activated the TT when they summoned Breaker, but I feel like we've got the better field overall. I don't want to wipe away our field right now. So I'm just going to let that go through. And they're going to set one pass back to us. We draw another Thestalos. That's pretty good. And we're going to think about exactly what to do here because we don't want to play into a TT that they might have. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go for a meta on the Thestalos to bring in a Senshi. So Senshi can negate traps, which is pretty nice. And so I'm happy with that. I bring out the Breaker because I figure, I can use Breaker in main 2 to pop that back row if they don't want to use it right now. And if they do use it right now, I can probably negate it with Senshi. So I feel pretty good about this. They do have Econ, though, so they'll be able to take the Breaker. So we unfortunately played into that a bit. But, we can just pass back to our opponent and be fine here. We could also flip up the Tomato and try and attack in, but that drops them down to 5,100, so they still have enough to pay for Stein. I don't necessarily want to do that, so I'd rather just leave the Tomato in defense, get back the Breaker, and pass back to them. And they're going to go for Snatch. They can't do this on the Senshi, because Senshi can be targeted by spells. So I do let them take this back because they didn't realize that, so I let them take it back and do a different play here. I think it's fine, honestly. We're in a good spot either way, even if they do something crazy here. It's hard to clear the Tomato, and then we've got Thestalos Tribute over that. So I feel pretty good about this. They're going to set one pass back to us. We draw a Mobius, which isn't the best here, but it's something. We're going to flip up the Tomato here, attack in with the Breaker. They're going to draw, and now we're going to attack in for 3,400. So this does deprive them of the Stein range, so this is what I was looking for. And then main 2, we contribute off that Breaker for a Thestalos here. I should do this in main 2 because I was going to attack in with the Breaker anyways. I mean, I guess I could have attacked in with the Senshi instead and then gone for more damage off the Thestalos, but I figured that if the set was like Sangan or something like that, then I wanted to potentially rip whatever they searched out of their hand with the Thestalos, but it was just Dekoichi, so similar sort of idea where I, still am repping out of a bigger hand, so that's kind of nice, but we managed to hit the Snatch Steal, which I'm very happy about. Snatch Steal would be a little bit annoying here if they took control of the Thestalos, attacked into the Senshi, that would be rough, or if they took control of the Senshi, went to Borg, popped Tomato, that would be really rough, because then we couldn't bring out Mobius. But other than that, I feel like Mobius, like with the Tomato up, Mobius is pretty much an inevitability at some point. And if they go Snatch, then we would have been fine popping it. So I think we would have been fine here. They're going to go for Sook, though, and flip down that Thestalos, hit over that. And now they're just going to set one pass back to us. I feel perfectly good about this. I feel like we've got a lethal line here. So we're just going to bring out Warrior Lady. We could have gone for the Mobius instead, but if that set is like Book of Moon or something, then we don't have lethal here. Whereas if it is Book of Moon, we still have lethal here through these attacks. We're taking the Warrior Lady first. I think in hindsight, I should have attacked in with the Tomato first, just in case they brought back a monster from Grave with something like Call. But I think we still win here either way, no matter what they bring back with Call. They do need to have the Call, but like realistically, we win either way. If they bring back Dekoichi, we can crash into that with Tomato. If they bring back Breaker, we can hit over it with Senshi potentially, and then get in for 1,400 more. They bring back Warrior Lady, same thing applies. So yeah, we just win this game. Even if they bring back Reaper, we attack in for more than lethal here, because that's to come back and attack. So we attack over the Warrior Lady, they banish the Senshi, and we will just attack in directly for lethal. So that will do it for that game here. And very, very good game 1, I thought. Even though we were confied turn 1, we were able to recover. And you'll notice that we did not use Stein at all there. A lot of the times you win with this deck not playing Stein at all. Sometimes you do win with Stein, though, and you may indeed see that here, potentially. Our opponent's going to T-set pass, and this is a really good hand for us. We can go Sidra, then tribute that for a Zaborg, pop their monster there. We could have gone for Heavy here as well, in addition, just to clear away their back row. But I feel like Breaker's a better trade for the back row there. So I felt like I could set up the Breaker later. If they do clear our Zaborg with their back row, they're probably going to set another back row later that we can then use for Breaker, or we can like Regeki break their back row as well. So I feel like there's a lot of different options for clearing that back row. And we don't necessarily need to waste the Heavy now when it could come in handy later when we're potentially going for like an OT push or like a big push of some sort. So I'm just going to set the break pass back to them. They're going to set 2 pass back to us. And then with draw phase priority, I am going to use the Regeki break dodge around a dust shoot here if they've got it. And we're going to pitch a last will here. I could have potentially not done that, but, like, I don't have a way to trigger the last will right now, so I don't really wanna use it yet. And I feel like having 2 monsters is better. We also wanna heavy their back row here. So I feel like it's ultimately better just to pitch the will. We go for the heavy now. They've got this Raigeki break. They're able to pop these at Borg there, which is quite unfortunate. And yeah, this other card was Dust Shoot, so I'm very glad I did draw phase priority on the Raigeki break. We're going to bring out a Tomato here and attack indirectly for 14. And our opponent's going to draw for turn. There are some ways that they can get out of this if they special summon Sidra, tribute over for a Zaborg, pop our Tomato. That's really bad. But they'd have to have another Zaborg in hand. And oh, there's the Sidra. Do they? Okay, they don't have the Zaborg. And we're feeling very good about that. We'll take the 7 from that. And then we're just going to bring out Stein. I figure we've got Breaker to pop their back row if they've got one. And if they don't, we're feeling pretty good here. We draw Zaborg. Now, in hindsight, I think the better move here would have just been summon Zaborg, pop the Sidra, try and get in. Because if they've got like Raigeki break and they're just saving it for when we go for the Cyberstein play, then that's a bit awkward if we just bring out Breaker and pop the back row. So I do go Breaker, pop the back row here, but if it's Raigeki break, they just chain that to the Breaker, pop the Cyberstein. Sure, we haven't paid 5,000, but they can just clear up our board because they can just attack over the Breaker with the Sidra next turn. So in hindsight, I should have just gone for Zaborg and then you save the Breaker for later. But I got greedy here, and luckily the greed did pay off for me here. And then just bring out the Cyber Twin Dragon. And then just get in for a ton of damage. But yeah, it could have definitely backfired on me, and that's why I should have done Zaborg instead. I could have even like paid 5 for Cyberstein, then tribute off the Stein to pop the Sidra, because that still would have been lethal, I believe, if we brought it like Senshi. If we brought it Senshi, then that can negate the Raigeki break, tribute over Sidra, then pops the Cyber Dragon, and really the only thing that stops this is like they get Boogamoon, but then they just set down our Zaborg, which is honestly fine. So yeah, I think that, yeah, in hindsight, actually the right play would have been Cyberstein out as Senshi, tribute over the Stein for the Zaborg, and get him for lethal that way. But I didn't think of it at the time. And yeah, we were able to win anyways, which this deck can do as well. Even if you don't win through the optimal means, you can still definitely win. Seems like the last card in hand was a Chaos Sork, but they didn't have any lights engraved to set that up. So we really had to win this turn. Luckily we did. So that's going to be the end of the game there. Cyberstein showing its value in this deck for sure. And, again, we didn't have to OTK here. We could just coasted on the Monarch stuff and still probably won this duel. But this wasn't the only game I got with the deck, so let's dive into the next one now. Okay, we got another game here against Rago Drago. If you can get this on the channel, always a pleasure to have them on. We're diving into the games, and we do win the die roll this time, so we will be going first here, which is pretty good. And we're diving in, seeing how we do. Oh, we're so good. We drew Comfy here. Great stuff from us here. And we got Last Will plus a Monarch in hand, plus cards that float or stay on field. This is just great. We go for the Comfy right away. We've got a Tomato, a TT, a Zaborg, a Sangan, and a Thestalos. Very interesting hand, because what we'd like to do next turn is go for like a big Monarch push plus Stein. But the TT kind of complicates things, because if they TT pop our Mobius, we can't actually get in lethal damage here, because we'd be able to bring out Stein, bring out like Cyber Twin. The Cyber Twin is just 5,600, and then plus 700 from Stein is 6,300, which doesn't kill them. It does drop them below the point where they can Stein us, but I don't necessarily want to be at that point. So I could just take the TT here. But then we got an awkward spot where, like, then if we want to go for a push, they could just set Tomato and wall up that way. So I think what I actually do here is I take the Sangan. And this may seem weird, but I do think it is correct, because we don't want them getting a search, and we don't want them pairing the Sangan with the TT. If they do use the TT, they have to pop the Tomato if they bring that out, which I'm perfectly fine with. And we've got a Reaper here. We could potentially set the Reaper, but I'd rather set the Tomato. If we set the Tomato, then we could potentially flip it up, attack in for 14. And if they don't TT that, then we feel fine about that, because we get in. If they do TT it, then we can go for another play here. So I feel like we're still in a really good spot here if we send the Sangan. We know the hand is TT, Tomato, Thestalos, and Zaborg. We're just going to set the Tomato here. If they draw into Sidra, they go Sidra, Zaborg. And that is what it is, but I feel like Tomato's good. And also, we want this Tomato, like, to bring out things from the deck right now. So that way, like, if we want to go for the Mobius tribute, we can tribute out a Sangan potentially. We've still got another Tomato in hand for later as well. But it does deck thin through our targets a little bit. So they're going to attack in with their Tomato, hitting into ours, and we're just going to bring in a Sangan for our Mobius play here, which we are perfectly happy with. They set one, which is probably the TT. I'm going to tribute off that Sangan for the Mobius here. They go for the TT here. And now in main one, we've got a bit of an interesting decision. So we searched out the Treeborn, because I feel like Treeborn's good to just get in rotation for if we draw Monarchs later. I feel like that's a pretty good plan. We could have also searched out like Cyberstein for the next turn as well. But I've got this Will in hand. I'm sort of debating, like, do I go for the Will or do I not go for the Will? Because I could go for Will, bring out Cyberstein, get in for a ton of damage here. But we know the rest of the hand is Zaborg, Thestalos, and an unknown. And I feel like if they can't bring out anything, like let's say the last card, well, if the last card in hand was Cider, they probably would have gone Cider as Zaborg. So we don't have to worry about that. So maybe we should go for Stein plus Twin. I felt like it was fine just like holding off for a bit and just playing it a bit safe. I don't think they can kill us here if they go Stein and bring out Twin. I don't think that kills. That's just 6,300. We dropped down to 700, which is bad, to be fair. But we can at least bring out like, I mean, we could set Reaper, but that doesn't do anything. So actually that would have been really bad if they went for that. So maybe we should have gone for the will the previous turn and gone for either a big play or just brought out like another Reaper, hit in to tear a card out of their hand. Maybe that would have been right. Maybe I was a bit too conservative here, but we drew a Regeki break, so we're never punished for this. And now we've got a really good setup. We're just going to bring out a Tomato, attack in for 14. So the Regeki break, pass back to them. Now we can pitch the Treeborn and get going. They're just going to pass back to us, though. This is really nice. We're going to tribute over the Tomato for this Thestalos, rip a Mobius out of their hand, go for a Will, which will bring out Stein, and our opponent sees the writing on the wall, and they're just going to emit defeat. So we saved the Will, and it did come up there, but I think we should have gone for it earlier because, again, we would have been in a bit of a tough spot if they did go like Stein plus Twin. So, you know, you live and learn, and I think we ultimately potentially would have won that either way, but this hand's going to be a lot different. Very, very interesting hand here for sure. They're just going to start by setting one, and we draw triple BrainCon, double Regeki break, and a Comfy. A very, very strange hand. We go for this Comfy here, getting a peek at what they've got, and we see that they've got a Sidra, a Snatch, double BrainCon, and a Warrior Lady. So we both got a ton of BrainCons in hand. It's going to make for a very, very strange game for sure. I think I want to pitch the Warrior Lady because I don't want them to continue to get aggressive here. But I also could have let them have the Warrior Lady and then gotten BrainCon on the Warrior Lady to banish their set and the Warrior Lady. That might have been the right choice. So I think in hindsight, I should have taken the Sidra instead or the Snatch. Oh, Snatch can be dealt with by Regeki break. So I think I took Warrior Lady, but I really think I shouldn't have in hindsight. But they might have just never committed the Warrior Lady until we had like a Treeborn anyways. So it may not have mattered. But I think in hindsight, I should have taken the Sidra. I think it would have been better here because Sidra being in their hand opens up a lot of awkward scenarios for us later. We draw Soul Exchange. So we got all the cards that give us tributes, but we don't have any of the Monarchs, which can be this deck's sort of experience here. It is a flaw with the deck. We draw a Sidra, so we actually have a couple options here. We could go for Soul Exchange on this set and then go for Sidra, but then they just BrainCon the Sidra and tribute over for a Sidra of their own. Or if we set the Sidra, they special summon out their Sidra, hit over that. So it doesn't really work out for us either way. We could just special the Sidra here, attack over their set, but again, then they go for Sidra, they BrainCon our Sidra, get in for a ton of damage. I don't like that. So I think what I'm actually going to do here, since they're not doing anything else, I'm just going to set this other Regeki break, pass back to them. Unfortunately, they MST our Regeki break, so that doesn't get any value there. But I still feel like this is fine. They're going to go for a Tomato here, attack in for 14. We will take that, dropping down to 5,600. We draw Stein. And we are so close to pulling something off here, but we can't quite do it because, unfortunately, with Stein, you know, if we want to use Stein, we can't use BrainCon and vice versa because we'll drop down below 5,000 if we use BrainCon. We'll drop down below 800 if we use Stein. So that makes things really hard here. And we just go for Soul Exchange and then tribute set over for this Sidra here because they'd have to like tribute summon out their own Sidra over their set to get over our Sidra. And I'm okay with them doing that, but it is very awkward here for sure. They're just going to pass back to us. We draw a Tomato here. Now, I could start to get aggressive here, but again, I don't want them to go, like, you know, special summon out Sidra. They take control of our Sidra and then get off to the races. So it's a bit awkward here. So I just set the Tomato, pass back to them. They've got a Mobius here. We will chain the Regeki break, and we're just going to pitch one of these BrainCons. We're probably not going to use all three. And we go for the back row instead of the Mobius because I feel like we can pair the Mobius with our BrainCon here. Unfortunately, they've got a Regeki break in the back row, so they're going to go for our Tomato there, pitching a BrainCon of their own, then hit over our Sidra. So looking pretty bad for us. That Zaborg is okay, but we can't really use it with their Mobius because if we summon out Zaborg, it has to pop something on field. If we use their Mobius to tribute for it, then it'll have to pop itself. So I don't really think that's the best. We set this Cyber Stein here, pass back to them. It's not ideal, but, you know, I figured the BrainCons will be more used to us than these Steins. But they're going to attack over our Stein here, and that will go through. They pass back to us. We draw. That's still really good. We can go for BrainCon, take control of the Mobius, and then tribute over for that for a Thestalos. We attack him with the Mobius first. In case they've got a Karibo, we'd like them to use that up here rather than have it be in the hand to rip off a Thestalos. But it looks like they do not. Now we just bring out the Thestalos. Same amount of damage either way. And we hit a Sidra. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'm very okay with that. We set a BrainCon, pass back to them. And they're going to go for Snatch on our Thestalos. I mean, that's okay, but like, oh, it's not okay. Not okay at all. They've got Cyberstein here, and they're able to use the Cyberstein, pay 5, go for a Cyber Twin. Yeah, that's kind of rough. I mean, yeah, this does win the game. It was a bit of a risk on their part because we could have had a way to potentially stop this, but unfortunately we do not. We just have this dead brain con. So yeah, that will go through and we will lose that game. So yeah, rough stuff indeed. But I think we did as good as we could, except for the DD Warrior Lady play. I think the DD Warrior Lady play was definitely incorrect in the beginning. But yeah, we had to play that one a bit weirdly given our hand. And if we had played it better, we probably could have won that one, but unfortunately we did not. This hand, though, looks like it pretty much plays itself. So this is a great hand. We set the tomato, we set the Raigeki break, we can pitch the frog off the Raigeki break and feel fine with that. We got tomato to float into something else to tribute over for Mobius, so we feel very good about that as well. They're going to set one pass back to us. We're just going to pitch the Treeborn Frog in draw phase, so that way we can bring back our Treeborn Frog in standby, and then we can tribute that for a Mobius, flip up this tomato, and just cut them off with Stein range. I could have saved the Mobius. I could have saved it for Soul Exchange, and when they had Spell and Traps in the back row, but I feel like in this format, it is necessary to just get them down below 5,000 as fast as possible if we know they're on Stein, because that is just a win con for them at various points in the game. So I choose to do this. It may be a bit aggressive, but I do stand by it. We've got Treeborn Frog coming back every turn. We got double Soul Exchange in hand. We got Reaper to wall up if we need to. So I feel like we can afford to get aggressive here. They're going to go for a Soul Exchange on our Mobius and pop the tomato, pass back to us. We draw an MST, which isn't the best for us here, but it's not the worst for us either. We're just going to set this Reaper, set the MST, pass back to them. We set MST in case they've got like something that we want to chain it to. I don't know. Or if they set it back row and then we can use MST. Because if they set back row while they get Treeborn up, it's probably a chainable, so we can use MST in the end phase there. But it looks like we'll get a little bit punched for that because they bring out a Mobius. I don't think the MST was really doing much for us anyways, so it wasn't the worst thing to lose there. But we get this Reaper, they've got a Comfy, and they'll rip out a Soul Exchange. That's perfectly fine. We had double Soul Exchange. Probably weren't using both, and that Brain Con is going to be really nice here. So again, I don't think we're at risk of dying anytime soon because they're cut off from Stein. So what I can do here is I can Brain Con one of their Monarchs, crash the Monarchs together, and then go for a Reaper play to rip a card out of their hand, which is really good. Cool to see the namesake of this format going into action here. So we get to rip a card out of their hand now, and we rip a Breaker. I'm happy about that. Breaker can get in for 1,600 over our Reaper, which would be a little bit annoying. So our opponent's going to bring out this Treeborn Frog here. They're just going to bring out a Sangan, attack into the Reaper that way, deal 700. And they're going to go for Brain Con to pop our Reaper. It's a bit rough for us because we did want the Reaper to stick around as a defensive option, but we draw Mobius here, which is pretty good anyways. We're going to tribute off that Frog, go for a Mobius here, attack over the Sangan. We could have saved the Mobius in hand for when they had a set off Soul Exchange, but they're already really low. I'd rather cut them off of like Brain Cons or Premats in the future. So I'd rather just get in for 14 here. Drop them down to 700. And now they're in a really tough spot. So they add a Reaper to hand off the Sangan Search, which can wall up for quite a bit. But we do have the Soul Exchange to eventually deal with that. So that's pretty nice. We get back this Treeborn Frog here. Then we go for a Sangan. We attack into their Reaper with that. And then we attack into the Treeborn Frog with the Sangan. Can't activate Soul Exchange this turn because we've used the battle phase. But we can do it next turn to clear the Reaper if we want to here. So they're going to get back the Treeborn. And maybe there's a reason I could have set the Sangan. But I wanted to summon the Sangan because I didn't want them to use like Moment of Crossout on it, because I feel like that would be really bad. So I'd rather just keep it here. If they do pop it, we can deck then, or we could even go for Stein if we have enough life points left, and potentially go for a lethal shot. We draw Thessalos, which was really good here. We're going to go for a Soul Exchange on the set. We were originally planning on using it on the Reaper, but with this Thessalos in hand, I think it's fine to use it on the set there. And I'm very glad we did that because that was a tomato, so I'm glad to get rid of that. We pitch a Reaper from their hand, dropping them down to 400 now, and then we're going to pass back to them. And they are going to just pass back to us. Okay. We draw a Breaker here. Breaker doesn't really do anything right now, so we're just going to keep it in hand, pass back to them. They're going to tribute for a Thessalos of their own, rip that Breaker out of our hand, crash into our Thessalos, and then pass back to us. We draw a TT here. We're feeling good about that. We can set that. If they do ever summon a thing, then we can potentially TT the board, get a search off Sangan. I don't want to use it on the Treeborn Frog coming back, but it is nice to have that option. They're going to go for MST in the draw phase, though, just to play around that anyways, and, that was probably a smart thing of them to do. But they're going to go for a Mobius now, and now they're going to crash the Mobiuses together and pass back to us. We draw meta here, which is actually really good. We can go for meta on the Sangan, go into a Dragoness here. This is why I put it in the Fusion deck, because I feel like it does come up in cases like this, and we'll search out a Cyberstein, so now we can go into a Cyber End Dragon and try and win the game that way. If they had Karibo, that would be rough, but I feel like Karibo isn't really played in this format, and yeah, it's just a dead Bread Con. So I'm very happy with that. I'm happy with how the deck performed. I think this deck felt really good. Now, you did see in game 2 of this match, the flaw in this deck, right? If you draw one part of the deck and not the other, it'd be really bad because you're just drawing either things to facilitate tributes without actually having the payoffs for them, or you're just drawing tribute monsters without any way to bring them out. That's why this deck is playing triple 3-born frog, because once you get this in rotation, the tribute side of things becomes a lot easier. But it can be rough if you draw them that way, as we saw in game 2. Not unwinnable, because again, I do think if I played differently in game 2, things would have turned out a bit better. But it does become very tough. So, actually, I think here we actually even could have changed our way that we played in the end phase. We could have, or not in the end phase, in the last turn. If we had brought out DD Worthley instead, we wouldn't have risked the Karibo. We could have just crashed the Worthley into the Reaper, then attacked directly with Dragonist for 12. And then if they go for Karibo, we still have a ton of life points left, so I'm fine with that. But, you live and learn. And we were able to win this one either way. So, I'm ultimately happy with how the deck performed, but I think it does show that, it does take some skill to pilot this. It's not just an instant win deck, although occasionally you do draw hands that just instantly win you the game. I don't think that it's a no-skill deck. I do think it takes a fair amount of skill to pilot, and it also isn't the best deck in the format, or at least the undisputed best deck in the format, in my opinion. I think it's very, very good. The hands that automatically win are just cracked, but the hands where you just are trying to draw into a way to turn on your hand are really bad. And that's a flaw that a lot of other decks in this format don't quite have. But what do you think of this deck? Do you think that it's better than I'm giving it credit for? That it's the tier 0 dominant threat of Reaper format? Or do you think that's even worse than I'm saying? Maybe it's tier 2. Maybe it shouldn't even be making it into top cuts. Let me know it in the comments below. I always look forward to discussing these sorts of things with you. Also, if you like this sort of content and want to see more Reaper gameplay, definitely subscribe to the channel. I'm planning on releasing a bunch more of it in the coming days and weeks, so definitely look forward to that. And also, we'll be holding some tournaments in this format in the YGR from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below. Great place to find games in this format and any other format that I've covered on the channel. Also, if you want to support me directly, you can sign up for my Patreon. And if you do sign up for the Patreon, get shout out in these videos. So big shout outs to Tyler Compton, Rincewin, GeoMyFS, Porkstrap, Brendan Donker, and Dumptruck. It really means a lot that you all support me this way and motivates me to make more videos like this. I hope you enjoyed as always, and until next time, I've been Ben from YGR from Zero, and I'm signing off.